Today I'm going to talk about transcribing, and I used to transcribe quite a bit. I found these old books I have that I did quite a few transcriptions, and I got in the habit back then when I did it of writing the date. For instance, here's one I did of Bessie's Blues. I'll hold up there, you can see any work I did I would put the date, and I did this on February 22nd, 1989, so it's a while ago. I was quite ambitious, and I did these with, not with a computer, because we didn't have computers then. I did it with a cassette tape and a cassette deck and a pot of coffee and my book. And I got so I could do about a page an hour. So like a 32-bar song, I could take me an hour to write a chorus out. And you know, I would listen to it, play it, write it. And some people say memorize the whole thing and then play it from memory. That's okay. I wrote them out because really the way I learned to transcribe was more from a practical work thing. You know, I was in these bands back then, these disco bands. It was the disco era, and there was lots of work for horn players. And I was just a kid. I really didn't even know, basically, to be honest, I didn't really even know all the major scales. I would learn them as I needed them, kind of. You know, oh, I got to learn A flat, I learned A flat. The band I was in, I got in one of these cover bands, and these guys couldn't read or write music, these rhythm section players, as a lot of these bands are. I mean, these guys really, literally did not read or write music. And we learned everything off of records. We learned stuff off of 45, like this, right off the record player. We would sit in a room, and the bass player would run the record. We'd all be in the same room. Drums, guitar, bass, me, maybe the other horn player. And we would sit there and he would move the needle back and forth and we would learn these songs like that. And they would pick up their stuff, they would play it and just hear the cuts, and they would hear, these guys had great ears because they never wrote anything down. And they were only a couple years older than I was, but I was amazed at how well they could hear things. Really great ears. But it was very difficult to hear the horn parts, and we were kind of coming from, horn players always are sort of from another world because we come up through the school system and we read music and we sort of have learned that way. And then when you encounter these people, these ear players, you sort of have to learn how to communicate with them. And sometimes they say, well, you're going to, you know, if you need charts, write the charts out. And they would give me these records, these 45s like I just held up. And I would go home with these things and I would transfer them. I had a little cassette player. I transferred them onto cassette. I remember the first horn arrangement I transcribed. I don't remember exactly which song it was, some pop song of the day. And I would take whatever was on there and reduce it to just trumpet and sax. And I remember, a 2.5, 3 minute song, it could take me literally 4 hours to write out those parts. Something that now would take me 5 to 10 minutes to write out. There was a learning curve. So how do you get from that, you know, to writing out Bessie's Blues, or I also wrote out here some George Coleman, Stitt, Hank Mobley, Harold Vick, John Coltrane. I've got like Chasing the Train, everything here. What happened was, as I did it, you know, because you're translating the sound and then notating the sound, so you're sort of going the reverse of reading music. You're taking the sound and then creating sound from the written word. You're reversing it and taking the sound and writing it into a form. The learning curve was fast. Your ear develops, but the first part of this climb is difficult. So it's sort of the reverse of like, when people climb Mount Everest, it's the last part that's hard. The first part's relatively easy. So here, it's the opposite. The first part is very hard. Like the first couple things you're going to transcribe, the first couple of dozen, they're going to be pretty hard. But you're going to get better at it. You're going to get a lot better at it. And the other thing I found was that, particularly somebody like Sonny Stitt, if I was writing out something fast, say a fast B-flat blues, and I couldn't quite hear what he was playing, because like I said, I was doing it on a cassette recorder, and I wasn't slowing it down. I was figuring out full speed. If I couldn't hear it, I'd go through my records and I'd find a slower B-flat blues. And lo and behold, quite a few of the licks and riffs and just ideas were the same from the slow version to the fast version. So I could hear it slow. Then when I went back to the fast version, it was much more easy to hear what was going on because he reused a lot of material, as do most people if you write them out, you know. And they you know, now when things get more after Coltrane, when the harmony exploded into other, you know, forms and realms, it's a little harder to hear. But you always have to keep in mind there's only 12 notes. You know, once you sort of narrow it down and pinpoint it where it is, it's got to be this or that. And especially now that you're able to slow things down on the computer and everything, it's much easier to do. So even when it was fast, it's kind of like, you know, it's not like there's 1,000 different choices. There's only like a few choices a lot of times as to like the fast riffs. The learning curve is fast. It's just that the first part is very difficult. The tedium, or, you know, whatever you think, you sit down with that blank paper and a recording, and you just have to accept that the first few times, if you've never done it before, it might be somewhat hard, but it gets a lot easier pretty quickly.